Hello and welcome to the final installment of migrating of all of the base game cards. Yes, you heard right. This is the last episode of this series and it's a big one. We'll be going over the final 8 cards of the base game deck, but as always, if you want insight into the grading system, check out the description or click on the link in the top right hand corner to get to the first video, where I explain it all. But let's get started. The first card of the final episode of rating base game cards is a banger. Viral Enhancers. This card is a quintessential part of the so-called green combo, a set of combo cards that benefit off, enhance, or require cards with micro, plant, or animal tags. Viral Enhancers helps both with placing greeneries by granting instant plants whenever you play green tags that don't collect resources, as well as scoring points directly by granting additional animals or microbes. The first point can be especially significant whenever you fear that your opponent has plant destroying cards on hand, since the instant plants can enable you to convert before the asteroids hit you. Also, don't forget that in rare circumstances, it can make sense to take plants instead of microbes or animals due to this. Maybe you lack one plant for a conversion to get the oxygen bonus bump. Just play small animals, take a plant off of viral enhancers instead of an animal, and then convert. And because viral enhancers helps both with placing greeneries and scoring a lot of points directly, it is valuable in both a rush and an engine play. Also, due to the science tag, make it super hard to pass in the draft. In a nutshell, Viral Enhancers is super flexible, can score you a ton of points or save your plants from destruction. I think it's an S tier card. While the last card was adding plants and animals, this next one removes them. Virus is one of the most notorious hate cards in the game. Why? Because all it does is hate. The player using the card does not benefit in any way other than by bringing down their opponents. Or at least that's what happens if you play this without combo potential. Of course, as an event, Virus benefits from Media Group and IC, and since it has a microbe tag, it can also trigger parts of the green combo. But the main reason you'll play this will always be the hate factor. Removing 5 plants so cheaply can be a huge asset in a gardener or bonus bump fight. And removing 2 animals from a card like Fish is one of the cheapest ways of scoring 2 points in the late game. Of course, if you're not playing 2P, you will need to know with which opponent you're fighting for first place. But all in all, Virus is a great card if you don't mind losing a few friendships. It's A tier in my opinion. Now we get to the last Jovian multiplier. Water import from Europa, or in short, Whyyy. In my opinion, this is the weakest Jovian multiplier since it isn't the strongest in any potential area. A. It isn't the cheapest, with Ganymede Colony costing 5 MC less. B. It doesn't grant more points than usual like Terraforming Ganymede does. And C. It doesn't grant a ton of production like IO Mining. What it does allow you to do is placing oceans for cheaper than usual, while also using titanium. Don't get me wrong, this can be useful, especially if you're literally swimming in titanium, but most of the time when playing Whyyy you'll want to find more Jovians, and those can also be paid for with titanium. And then, same as IO, at least if you want to make use of its ability, Whyyy needs to be played early on, which is not ideal, since then your opponents will be disincentivized to pass you more Jovians. So all in all, I'd take Ganymede and TG over Whyyy in the late game, and IO over it in the early game. But even so, it's still a huge threat in the draft and can never be underestimated. Jovian multipliers are just dangerous by nature, and it's difficult to design one that isn't good. Whyyy is a low A tier card for me. The last episode of rating base game cards also includes the last oxygen bumper, Water Splitting Plant. And this one is actually different from the last 3 that we have already discussed. It requires 1 less power to activate, but in exchange has an ocean requirement and doesn't yield any minerals. The price is roughly similar to the other bumpers, and so we can just evaluate this trade-off. For me, Water Splitting Plant drew the short end of the stick. The requirement is often very annoying, because bumpers, more than any other cards, are meant to be played very early on, and if that's not possible, then they become extremely useless quite fast. Also, not gaining any minerals through the action makes the card less appealing. Bumpers are often part of an engine strategy, where you deny your rush opponents, who might have invested a lot in plant prod, the points on the oxygen track. And as an engine player, you really would have liked the minerals. Sure, only paying 3 power per usage is nice and can enable you to play this card in situations where the other bumpers would have been useless. But in total, I think Water Splitting Plant is still a straight downgrade. In contrast to Ore Processor and the like, it lands in D tier. Now we get to 2 power production cards back to back. First of all, we have Wave Power. I don't like this card very much. It is expensive for 1 power prod, as it costs a whole 4 MC more than Power Plant. At the same time, it cannot be paid for with minerals, and therefore never really works as a cheap point card in the late game either. And then it has that annoying 3 ocean requirement, which means that you cannot play it in the super early game. What are the benefits over a similar card like Power Plant? I don't really know. It is only 1 MC cheaper to buy and play than the combo of Power Plant and Dust Seals, but is harder to play in the early game and cannot be paid for with minerals. I will place Wave Power in D tier. You might say, but Great Dam landed in C tier, and that one is also a weird mix of power prod and points. Yes, but its rate of MC per power prod is much better, and it does hold that crucial building tech. It's, in my opinion, a much superior card. And as I said, we get to the next power production card, and it's a somewhat bad one again. Windmills does a few things better than Wave Power. It is a bit cheaper and it holds a building tech, making it one of the best late game power prod cards. If you have some steel and need power prod in the mid to late game, for example to play a city, there are few better cards than Windmills. But the problem is its inflexibility. 7% oxygen is a horrendous requirement for power prod. You won't reach that until you're firmly in the mid game, and by then many use cases for Windmills are already dead or useless. Also, 7% oxygen basically means 8% because no one will really leave the track at 7% right before the bonus bump. This means that increasing the oxygen just to play this card is basically never a good idea, if you cannot also get another bump to get the bonus. Therefore, Windmills can also not be used for Dome Crater most of the time. In total, I think the benefits and disadvantages of Windmills versus Wave Power more or less even out, and it lands in D tier as well. I like both cards more than Solar Power for sure, but you gotta give that one that it is at least very flexible. Enough with subpar power prod cards. Let's get to subpar plant prod cards. Worms is the ugly little brother of insects. You can play it a bit earlier, but it is also much weaker. Not only does it have a weaker conversion rate between tags and prod, it also works off of a weaker tag in general. Microbe cards are not as good as plant cards, so you will play less of them, and together with the fact that you need double the amount of microbe cards to get the same prod, this means that Worms often only grants between a third and half the amount of plant prod you can expect from insects. I mean, I'd say that my Worms was great when it yielded 3 plant prod. That's a number I wouldn't be excited about with insects at all. Sure, Worms can often be played a gen or 2 earlier, but because it relies on other cards being played, you often don't want to play it as early as you can, because you are missing those cards. It's just a much weaker version of insects, and in my opinion lands in D tier. And lastly, we get to Zeppelins, the final card of the base game deck. This really is just another banker swing. It definitely is not a good development card. First of all, and most obviously, due to the 5% oxygen requirement, and secondly, because especially in 2P, not a lot of cities get played in the early to mid game. Let's compare it to Acquired Company. If you factor in the point with a cost of 5 MC, Zeppelins costs 8 MC versus Acquired Company's 10. This means with just 3 cities down, it already yields better prod per MC than one of the most solid early game production cards. But there's the catch. Early game. When was the last time you were able to play Zeppelins in the early game? You wouldn't play Acquired Company in Gen 6, so why should you play Zeppelins just because it yields a slightly better deal? So, as I said, in 99% of cases, Zeps is just a banker swing. Not an incredibly good one even. I will put it in D tier. And that was it. All of the 208 cards of the base game deck ranked in a big old tier list. Will this series continue with the expansion decks? Of course it will. But firstly, I will make a video where we will be going over this tier list and review some misplaced cards, some heated discussion points and some standouts. I also have a few other related ideas for additional videos before we continue with the Prelude and Venus Next cards. So if you don't want to miss anything, make sure you're subscribed, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Even in this last episode, let me know in the comments whether you agree with my ratings, or if not, how you would have rated these cards differently. And lastly, please check out my Twitch and my Twitter. See you in the next video.